In the heart of Chicago's financial district, where skyscrapers pierced the November sky and success seemed measured in cold, hard numbers, one man's world was about to change forever. Alexander Harrison wasn't just another CEO. At 45, he was a legend in the tech world. Founder of CyberShield, a cybersecurity empire that protected some of the world's largest corporations. His net worth exceeded $300 million, and his reputation was built on an unbreakable foundation of trust and technological innovation. But trust, as he would soon learn, was a fragile thing. The city was cold that morning, not just in temperature but in spirit. Alexander walked with the confidence of a man who believed he controlled every variable in his meticulously constructed world. His assistant, Derek Collins, walked 2 steps behind, always perfectly positioned, always anticipating Alexander's next move. Derek was young, Harvard-educated, with a smile that could charm investors, and a mind sharp enough to navigate the complex world of international cybersecurity. Alexander, speaking into his smartwatch, confirm the Singapore contract details. I want every potential loophole covered. Derek nodded, his fingers already dancing across his smartphone screen. 2 blocks away, sitting against a weathered brick wall, Thomas Miller watched. A veteran, 58 years old, his military jacket told stories of service and subsequent struggle. Homeless for the past 3 years, Thomas had developed an uncanny ability to read people. A skill honed through years of military intelligence and survival on unforgiving streets. Thomas, to himself. Something's not right. His eyes, sharp and observant, tracked Alexander and Derek's movement with a precision that spoke of years of training. As Alexander approached the intersection, Thomas stood. There was something about his movement, deliberate, purposeful, that caught Alexander's attention. Thomas. Mr. Harrison, Alexander stopped. Irritation flickered across his perfectly composed features. Alexander. Curtly. Yes? Thomas. Your assistant. He's planning something that could destroy everything you've built. The words hung in the crisp morning air, weighted with an unexpected intensity. Alexander. Dismissive. I don't have time for this. Thomas. His voice gaining strength. In my years of military intelligence, I've seen men like him, smiling to your face while planning your destruction. Something in Thomas's tone, a raw authenticity, a depth of experience, made Alexander hesitate. Back in his office, Alexander couldn't shake Thomas's words. Almost unconsciously, he began digging into Derek's records. At first, nothing seemed out of place. Derek's performance reviews were exceptional. His work was impeccable. But then, buried deep in encrypted communication logs, Alexander found something. Financial transfers, coded messages, connections to a competing cybersecurity firm in Shanghai. Alexander, whispering. What the hell? Alexander, to Derek. Explain these transfers. Derek's perfect smile momentarily faltered. Derek. It's just business, Alexander. Nothing personal. Alexander. You were planning to sell our proprietary algorithms to our biggest competitor. Derek. The market is competitive. I was ensuring my future. Later that day, Alexander found Thomas on the same street corner. Alexander. How did you know? Thomas. A knowing smile. When you've been betrayed before, you learn to recognize the signs. Thomas's story slowly emerged. A decorated military intelligence officer, he'd been betrayed by a colleague years ago. A betrayal that cost him his career, his family, his entire life. Thomas. Sometimes the most dangerous threats were the most familiar faces. Alexander. I want to offer you a job, security consultant, with full benefits. Thomas. Stunned. Why? Alexander. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from the most unexpected sources. Months later, Thomas Miller, now Chief Vulnerability Analyst at CyberShield, would often reflect on that cold November morning. How a chance encounter between a successful CEO and a homeless veteran had not just saved a company, but restored a man's dignity. And Alexander Harrison. He learned that true security wasn't about walls or algorithms. It was about seeing people. Really seeing them. The fallout from Derek's betrayal was immediate and profound. CyberShield's board of directors convened an emergency meeting, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Board member. This could destroy our entire reputation. Years of trust gone in an instant. Alexander sat quietly, his mind drifting back to Thomas, the homeless veteran who had seen what no one else could. Thomas Miller's life hadn't always been about survival on Chicago's unforgiving streets. 25 years ago, he was a top-tier military intelligence officer, respected and decorated. His specialty was identifying potential security risks, a skill that had saved countless lives during his service. But one betrayal changed everything. In 2005, during a critical mission in Afghanistan, Thomas uncovered a massive intelligence leak. His own commanding officer was selling classified information to enemy contacts. When Thomas reported the breach, instead of being celebrated, he was systematically discredited. Thomas. In the flashback. The truth doesn't always win. Sometimes it destroys you. His career ended. His marriage crumbled. The system he had dedicated his life to protecting had turned against him. Back in the present, Alexander was doing something unprecedented. He invited Thomas to a private meeting at CyberShield headquarters. Alexander. I want you to lead our internal security review. No one understands potential betrayal better than someone who's lived it. Thomas looked around the gleaming conference room, a world away from the cold street corners he'd called home. Thomas. Why me? Alexander. Because sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from those society has forgotten. Thomas's first task was comprehensive. Map out every potential vulnerability in CyberShield systems. But more than that, he was tasked with understanding the human element of security. Thomas. Technology can detect a breach, but only human intuition can predict one. His methods were unconventional. He interviewed every employee, not just looking at their credentials, but reading their stories, their motivations. Alexander discovered something remarkable in Thomas. Beyond his security expertise, Thomas possessed a profound understanding of human psychology. Alexander. You see people differently. Thomas. When you've been invisible, you learn to truly see others. Months passed. CyberShield not only recovered from the potential breach, but became a global leader in adaptive cybersecurity. Their approach was revolutionary, combining technological innovation with deep human understanding. Thomas, once homeless, now wore a tailored suit, but he never forgot his roots. Thomas. Success isn't about forgetting where you came from. It's about using those experiences to help others. The company started a unique initiative, hiring veterans and individuals who had faced significant life challenges. Their reasoning was simple. Resilience cannot be taught, but it can be recognized. Alexander. Sometimes the most secure systems are built by those who understand vulnerability. For Alexander, this was more than a business strategy. It was personal redemption. He had learned that true leadership wasn't about controlling every variable, but about understanding the human stories behind those variables. Alexander. Reflecting. One conversation on a cold Chicago street changed everything. As the sun set over Chicago, casting long shadows across the city, Thomas looked out from the Cyber Shield headquarters. The view was dramatically different from his days on the street, but his perspective remained unchanged. Thomas, to himself, everyone has a story. Not everyone gets a chance to tell it. Years later, Cyber Shield would be studied not just as a technological success story, but as a human transformation narrative. A tale of how one moment of unexpected connection can rewrite entire futures. The lesson was clear. Sometimes, the most significant security comes from understanding, not just protecting.